So Eileen, what would you tell to the patient or the family who's concerned about participating in a trial in terms of there not being adequate oversight, or what kind of safeguards there are in place to make sure that they're going to be okay when they participate?
I think this is a very important point, and I think it starts at the beginning, right? The inception of the idea for the study, that's undergone a series of reviews. It's not the investigator who decides that this is reasonable science and it's appropriate that this is looked at. It's typically gone through 3-4 reviews, often to make sure the idea is appropriate, the patient setting that it's being looked at is appropriate, the right drugs are being used, the right questions are being asked, the right endpoints are going to be able to be answered in the study. So that process can take anywhere from 2 months to 2 years to get the right study design in place. A big part of the process is Institutional Review Board, or IRB, oversight. So an IRB is a committee typically of physicians, of scientists, of lay people, of statisticians, sometimes patient advocates that sit and review as a committee the science and the human subjects protection, or the safety aspects for patient care. So is the question important? Are there enough safeguards built in? What's the monitoring plan? So for example, for a large trial, typically for a phase 3 study where we're looking at a potentially practice-changing aspect to a drug. And in that context, there may be 3, 4, 5, 600 patients involved. And there we would have a data and safety monitoring committee that would convene on a periodic basis to review the information as it becomes available in terms of side effects. Are we seeing more in one part of the study versus another, or in a different patient setting versus another? What are the early signals in terms of effectiveness? Or on the converse, is it not meeting the thresholds of activity that were pre-specified? And they can cause significant changes in the study conduct. So there, at a very local level, the patient is being followed closely. They'll often have extra tests that are part of the research safety aspects. At an institutional level, the principal investigator, who's the person who's ultimately responsible for the trial, has an important both ethical and professional obligation to both the patient and to the study. So there are a series of commitments that need to be met. So for example, each year an investigator will have to provide an overview of what happened during that past year to the IRB to make sure that meets certain criteria. And then at a national level, there are federal safeguards in place that oversee trials. So for example, periodically audits can be done of institutions, of trials, to make sure we're doing what we're supposed to be doing when we say we're going to do it, and to make sure there isn't an important safety signal being missed, to make sure that data is reported accurately and in a timely fashion, etc. So I think actually for clinical trials we have a very large depth of safety resources in place to try and ensure that the person in front of us is really taken care of and that their level of well-being is, again, respected.
Yes, I agree completely, and I will sometimes try to reassure patients by telling them the sometimes maddeningly long amount of time it takes to get a study open at our institution. I'm sure it's the same at your place, because we're trying to get an exciting idea open as quickly as possible. But because we have to jump through all of these hoops, and they're essential, sometimes they take longer than we'd like, but from the multiple levels of scientific review and the ethical review through the IRB and all of these other aspects that you described so well, I'd say on average, from study conception to actually being able to get a patient on study, probably averages close to a year at our center. But again, frustrating in a way, but also reassuring in terms of the safeguards that are in place to make sure we're doing things rigorously and well and safely. And I know both of us have served on data safety monitoring boards for various large studies, and we know sort of the level of rigor involved. And as you mentioned, the interim analyses that are often built into studies. So a study may be 500 patients, but there will be an early look after the first 100 or 200 patients to really get a sense of, hey, is this safe, and is there enough of a signal of effectiveness of this novel treatment that warrants it going forward and enrolling a few hundred more patients. So all of these aspects are, I think, built in very purposefully for a lot of these studies, just to make sure we're doing it right.